Ethan first met Grace on a humid afternoon at a roadside book stall in Brooksville. He was a humble schoolteacher from the quiet town of Willow Creek, and he was in the city for a training course. She was a bright-eyed secretary who loved poetry and the energy of city life. Their connection was immediate. They bonded over a shared love of local folktales and a plate of jollof rice at a street cafe. Ethan was gentle and attentive, listening more than he spoke, while Grace's laughter lit up every space they entered. In those early days, their differences felt charming and complementary rather than divisive. When Grace agreed to marry Ethan, she did so with a heart full of hope. He promised her a life of stability and honesty, a home filled with warmth in Willow Creek. She imagined that love would be enough to bridge the gap between the bustling city she adored and the remote town he cherished. In the beginning, it was. They would stroll hand in hand through Willow Creek's narrow red dirt roads at sunset, Grace teasing him about the way everyone respectfully called him Mr. Teacher in the town. Ethan would chuckle and squeeze her hand, grateful that this vibrant Brooksville woman had embraced his simple life. Their little house soon echoed with laughter and the aromas of Grace's cooking as she tried to recreate the suya and spiced fish she missed from the city markets. But as the months turned to years, early tensions began to seep into their marriage. The charm of Willow Creek's slow pace wore thin for Grace. She missed the bright lights and opportunities of Brooksville, the concerts, the busy markets, the feeling of progress and movement. Willow Creek, with its predictable routines and quiet nights, began to feel like a cage. Ethan first met Grace on a humid afternoon at a roadside book stall in Brooksville. He was a humble schoolteacher from the quiet town of Willow Creek, and he was in the city for a training course. She was a bright-eyed secretary who loved poetry and the energy of city life. Their connection was immediate. They bonded over a shared love of local folktales and a plate of jollof rice at a street cafe. Ethan was gentle and attentive, listening more than he spoke, while Grace's laughter lit up every space they entered. In those early days, their differences felt charming and complementary rather than divisive. When Grace agreed to marry Ethan, she did so with a heart full of hope. He promised her a life of stability and honesty, a home filled with warmth in Willow Creek. She imagined that love would be enough to bridge the gap between the bustling city she adored and the remote town he cherished. In the beginning, it was. They would stroll hand in hand through Willow Creek's narrow red dirt roads at sunset, Grace teasing him about the way everyone respectfully called him Mr. Teacher in the town. Ethan would chuckle and squeeze her hand, grateful that this vibrant Brooksville woman had embraced his simple life. Their little house soon echoed with laughter and the aromas of Grace's cooking as she tried to recreate the suya and spiced fish she missed from the city markets. But as the months turned to years, early tensions began to seep into their marriage. The charm of Willow Creek's slow pace wore thin for Grace. She missed the bright lights and opportunities of Brooksville, the concerts, the busy markets, the feeling of progress and movement. Willow Creek, with its predictable routines and quiet nights, began to feel like a cage. Their love was still there, evident in the way Ethan would cook Grace's favorite plantain pottage when she refused to eat, or how she would smooth his shirt collars before church, but it was now mixed with resentment and sorrow. Under the same roof, they lived in different worlds. Little Daniel grew up watching his father stare exhaustedly at lesson plans after school, while his mother leafed through old magazines from Brooksville with a distant look in her eyes. The air in their once joyful house became heavy with things unsaid, teaching Daniel early on that silence can carry a terrible weight. As the years passed, Ethan and Grace tried to find a fragile balance. They poured their hopes into their only child, Daniel, hoping he might one day reconcile the dreams of both his parents. At family gatherings, Grace would boast about how smart Daniel was, hinting that he belonged in a big city school where his talents could shine. Ethan, though hurt by the implication that Willow Creek wasn't enough, would force a smile and pat Daniel's shoulder proudly. He secretly hoped his son might stay close to home, perhaps become a teacher or a local leader, continuing the simple legacy of their town. But he also saw Grace's point. Daniel was exceptionally bright, and the boy himself hungered for more than Willow Creek could offer. Their home environment was a study in contrasts. One day, teenage Daniel brought home the highest score in the district on a national exam. Ethan lifted him in a rare embrace, calling him Nathaniel, God stands by me, praising him for making the family proud. Grace, overjoyed, peppered Daniel with questions about what universities he might attend, mentioning Brooksville and even abroad. That night, as Daniel slept, the couple's old argument resurfaced yet again in hushed voices behind their bedroom door. Grace wanted to leverage a distant uncle's connections in Brooksville to get Daniel into a prestigious American university scholarship program. Ethan feared sending their only child so far away. The thought of an ocean separating them made his heart pound with dread. He could succeed here, too, Ethan argued softly. There is success in living a good, honest life among your people. Grace sighed in exasperation, among your people. And what about Daniel's own dreams, Ethan? Don't cage him because you're afraid. Their words were barbed with years of built-up hurt, Ethan feeling she despised the life he gave her, Grace feeling he never understood her aspirations. Ultimately, they compromised for Daniel's sake. With a forced brave face, Ethan agreed to support their son's opportunity to study in America if it came. He spent many evenings teaching extra lessons and saving every naira he could, while Grace dusted off her Brooksville contacts. When Daniel won a partial scholarship to a university in California, pride and heartbreak mingled in Ethan's chest. Grace wept tears of joy and envy combined, joy that Daniel would escape the confines of Willow Creek, envy that he got to go where she never did. On Daniel's last night at home before leaving for the U.S., the family shared a quiet dinner of pounded yam and egusi soup. The power had gone out, again, so they ate by the light of a kerosene lantern. Shadows danced on the walls as Ethan said a prayer for his son's journey. Grace squeezed Daniel's hand under the table, her eyes shining with pride. Despite the tension between husband and wife, in that moment they were united by love for Daniel and the unspoken hope that he would bridge the divide that had grown between them. Daniel's arrival in America was a dizzying blur of new sights and sounds. The city he landed in was nothing like Willow Creek, skyscrapers, four-lane highways, strangers with unfamiliar accents. In his small dorm room that first week, he often thought of his father and mother. He remembered how Ethan clasped his shoulder at the airport, eyes wet, voice steady as he said, "Make us proud, my son." Daniel felt the weight of that request. Each night he fought off loneliness by reminding himself he carried his family's hopes across the ocean. He promised to phone home every Sunday and write emails describing every new experience. In those initial months, he kept his word with devotion. During weekly calls, Ethan's deep voice crackled over the line, brimming with joy and relief at each "Hello, Papa," from Daniel. They would talk for an hour or more. Ethan asked endless questions. Did you find a good church? Are you eating well? How are your studies? Daniel would smile at his father's worry and paint vivid pictures of his life there. The size of the library, "Papa, you wouldn't believe it, bigger than our whole school in Willow Creek. The taste of pizza, it's good, but I miss Mama's cooking," the kind American roommate who struggled to pronounce Ethan. In those moments, the distance felt bridged by excitement and love. Grace occasionally joined the calls too, excitedly urging Daniel to focus on his studies and make connections that could lead to a job in the city when he returned. Though still in Willow Creek physically, her heart seemed to live vicariously through Daniel's American adventure, and for once husband and wife shared a genuine smile, listening together to their son's stories crackling over the phone line. As time went on, life in America swept Daniel into its powerful current. University workload mounted. He spent long nights in the library and part-time shifts at the campus bookstore to make ends meet. It was also in the university halls that he met Amelia. She was a fellow student assigned as his lab partner in a biology class, a warm, curious soul with a quick laugh and an openness that put Daniel at ease. Amelia found Daniel's stories of Brighthaven fascinating. She loved the way his face lit up describing Willow Creek's festivals and the taste of fresh mango from his backyard tree. Friendship turned into quiet dates over coffee, and eventually into love. For the first time, Daniel felt he had someone by his side in this strange new world, someone who understood both his excitement and his fears. Yet with Amelia's companionship came subtle changes in Daniel's values. She introduced him to her circle of friends, ambitious, cosmopolitan young people who talked about internships, stock options, and the latest music concerts. Eager to fit in, Daniel found himself downplaying the more traditional parts of his upbringing. At first, it was unconscious. He would chuckle awkwardly when friends jokingly asked if his dad had internet in the bush, and he didn't correct them about Willow Creek's small but lively community. Amelia never mocked his background, but through her, Daniel tasted a life with new rules. In this world, success was measured in career milestones and personal freedom. Old obligations, like calling one's parents every week, began to feel less pressing amid exams, road trips, and the gentle intoxication of young love. Daniel's weekly calls home became bi-weekly, then monthly. The shift was gradual, almost imperceptible at first. One Sunday, an invitation to study with a group for midterms meant he texted Ethan an apology and rescheduled their call. Another week, a special date with Amelia, her surprise tickets to a film Daniel had been wanting to see, made him postpone calling yet again. Each time, he rationalized it to himself, "Papa will understand, I'm busy with important things." And indeed, when they did speak, Ethan's first concern was always Daniel's well-being. "You sound tired, my son. Are you getting enough rest?" he would ask. Daniel assured him everything was fine, piling on enthusiastic anecdotes to cover the fact that these calls were less frequent. If Grace was upset by the reduced contact, she mostly swallowed her complaints, not wanting to pressure Daniel and drive him away. Still, Daniel could sometimes hear the quiet hurt in her voice when she'd say, "We miss you so much. I wish you were here," and he'd quickly change the subject to avoid guilt. The more Daniel immersed himself in American life, the more the dynamic with his father shifted. In subtle ways, Amelia's influence and his desire to assimilate began to reprogram his perspective. She encouraged him to apply for internships in New York and San Francisco, to imagine a future where he didn't necessarily return to Brighthaven right after graduation. When Daniel mentioned his father's hope of him coming back home to work or at least visit, Amelia had gently asked, "What do you want, Daniel?" It was the first time he truly considered that question separate from his duty to family. He still loved Ethan deeply, but he began to see his father through the lens of his new world, as someone rooted in a past that Daniel was gradually outgrowing. During one video call, Ethan excitedly mentioned a modest teaching job that had opened up at the local high school, suggesting it could be perfect for Daniel if he came back. Daniel forced a smile but felt a flush of irritation. That night he vented to Amelia, who listened quietly as he sorted through a knot of feelings. Guilt for feeling angry at his well-meaning father, frustration at the pressure to return home, and a strange sense of shame, as if the life in Willow Creek was something he had to shed to fully become who he wanted to be. Not long after, the regular calls dwindled into a painful silence. At first, it was an unnoticed slip. Daniel missed 2 Sundays in a row due to an intense project deadline. He sent a short email, "Sorry Papa, very busy week, will call soon. Love you." Ethan read that line over and over, telling himself it was a good sign, his son was working hard and doing well, after all. But as the week stretched on, soon never seemed to come. Daniel always had a reason, a crucial exam, a weekend work shift, a networking event, travel with Amelia's family during holidays. Each reason sounded legitimate enough that he convinced himself his father wouldn't mind. But late at night, in the quiet of his apartment, Daniel's chest tightened with suppressed guilt. He would lie awake recalling how his father's voice sounded the last time they spoke, so full of warmth and yearning. He remembered Ethan saying softly, "I live for these calls, son." At the time, Daniel laughed it off, thinking it was just an expression. Now those words haunted him as he stared at the ceiling, telling himself he'd call next weekend for sure. Yet when next weekend came, something always interfered, or perhaps, he allowed it to interfere. For Ethan, the silence was bewildering and then agonizing. In Willow Creek, he checked his phone every day, the inexpensive smartphone that Daniel had bought him before leaving. Ethan learned to navigate its basics just so he could see his son's name flash on the screen. As the calls became infrequent, he would double-check the device's settings anxiously, afraid something was wrong with the network. Some evenings he walked to the little internet cafe by the post office, where a kind neighbor boy helped him send emails to Daniel. In halting, formally typed English, Ethan would write of simple daily things: "The garden is doing well this season, the rainy season has started, your mother visited her cousin last week," and always ending with, "We miss you. Hope to hear from you soon, my son." He kept the tone light and hopeful, not wanting to sound upset and drive Daniel further away. After hitting send, he would linger, rereading Daniel's last brief message in his inbox until the cafe owner dimmed the lights to close up shop. Loneliness took root in Ethan's heart. Grace by this time spent more weeks in Brooksville than in Willow Creek, helping a relative with a business, perhaps finding solace in the city at last. When she was home, she too was anxious and irritable about Daniel's silence, though she tried to mask it with stubborn optimism, insisting, "He's just busy. He'll call, you'll see." But mostly, Ethan was alone. He returned each day from school to an empty house, greeted only by the hollow echo of his own footsteps. In the afternoons, he'd sit on the front porch with 2 cups of tea, one for himself, one cooling untouched for Daniel, as if the boy might suddenly appear down the road, backpack slung over his shoulder like old times. They still called him Baba Daniel, and on occasion a neighbor would ask, "Any news from your son?" Each inquiry was a small twist of the knife, but Ethan would smile and respond, "Oh, he's doing very well, very busy with studies. He'll visit us after graduation." That polite smile would only last until he turned the corner out of sight, where his face would fall. The truth was, he wasn't sure when or if Daniel would ever come back to Willow Creek. Yet every night, Ethan prayed and held on to hope like a lifeline. Daniel, for his part, did not intend to abandon his father, but denial is a seductive comfort. He told himself that everyone drifts a bit during college and that once he established his career, he would make it all up to his parents. There were moments, though, when reality pierced through. One summer, Daniel received an email from a former neighbor in Willow Creek, casually mentioning that his father had fallen off a ladder while repainting the house. The neighbor said Ethan was mostly fine, just a sprained ankle. Daniel was alarmed and immediately dialed his father for the first time in months. When Ethan answered, voice surprised and joyous, Daniel's throat tightened with emotion at hearing that familiar baritone. He scolded his father for climbing the ladder alone, but Ethan joked, "Ah, my boy, I had to keep the house nice for when you come home." The guilt nearly broke Daniel then, hearing how even with an injury, his father's only concern was the homecoming that Daniel had delayed again and again. Daniel promised to visit after graduation, and Ethan's relieved laughter in response was like a knife twisting in his gut. After hanging up, Daniel had to step away from Amelia and friends to hide the tears that burned in his eyes. That night he hardly slept, old memories of childhood rushing back, his father carrying him on his shoulders at the Willow Creek New Year festival, or teaching him how to ride a bicycle on the dusty yard. Daniel realized how much he missed home, and vowed internally that once he finished his degree and secured a job, he would spend time with his father and mend the gap. Months later, Daniel graduated with honors and even secured a good entry-level job in the city. Amid the congratulations and celebrations, a persistent thought gnawed at him: I need to go home. Amelia and his friends suggested a summer road trip, but Daniel stood firm and booked a flight to Brighthaven. He could already hear the excitement in his father's voice when he told him the news: I'm coming home, Papa. I'll be there in June. Ethan had nearly shouted in joy over the phone, the happiest Daniel had heard him in years. Grace, who happened to be home that week, took the phone to express tearful happiness too, insisting they'd throw a big feast to welcome him. Daniel hung up feeling a mix of relief and nervous anticipation. He was coming back a different man. Would his father see that? Would his mother forgive the long silence? He hoped the gifts he bought and the stories of his accomplishments would smooth over any hurt. More than anything, he just yearned to see his father's proud smile in person and feel that comforting presence again. When Daniel's plane touched down and he finally made the journey from Brooksville back to Willow Creek, dusk was settling over the countryside. He hired a taxi for the last leg. As the car bumped along the familiar dirt road, mango trees and old bungalows coming into view, Daniel's heart pounded with a childlike eagerness. He imagined Ethan waiting on the porch, perhaps standing as soon as he heard the engine noise, hands on his hips in that familiar pose. But as the taxi pulled up to the house, something was off. The porch light was off and the compound was eerily still. Daniel stepped out into the warm evening air, the hum of crickets the only sound. His calls of "Papa, I'm home," met no response but his own echo. The windows of the house were dark. With a trembling hand, Daniel pushed open the creaking front door. Inside, the air felt stale and hot, carrying the faint scent of dust and the remnants of his father's favorite wood polish. "Papa," he called again, softer. His voice caught in his throat. In the glow of his phone's flashlight, Daniel saw the small living room exactly as he remembered, the threadbare armchair where Ethan read his Bible each night, the bookshelf with family photos. On the center table lay an envelope with his name on it. Frowning, Daniel picked it up. The envelope was unsealed, as if someone meant to hand it to him directly. He slid out the single sheet of paper inside. It was a short letter in his father's neat handwriting, dated just a week prior. Daniel sank onto the armchair as he read Ethan's words: "My dear son, if you are reading this, it means you are home and I am not here to greet you. I'm sorry, I held on as long as I could. I fell ill, and I asked your mother not to tell you, because I did not want to worry you or disrupt your life. I always knew you would return when you could. I am so proud of you, Daniel, more than words can say. Never doubt that. Welcome home, my son. Love, Papa." Daniel's vision blurred as tears flooded his eyes. The silence in the house was suddenly deafening, punctuated only by his sharp gasps as he tried and failed to hold back sobs. He clutched the letter to his chest, feeling a pain like he had never known, a howling emptiness where hope and love had been. "Papa, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," he choked out into the dark, as if his father might hear it somehow. His mind swirled with images of what could have been. If only he had called more, if only he had visited sooner, maybe he would have been here to hold his father's hand in his final moments. The weight of every missed call, every unanswered email, every selfish delay crashed down on him at once. Daniel cried until he had no strength, curled up in his father's armchair as the night deepened. In the days that followed, the town of Willow Creek enveloped Daniel in an unexpected embrace of kindness. Neighbors came by to express condolences and share stories of Ethan's final days. From them, Daniel learned that his father had been ill for months but carried on bravely, always saying he was fine. Even on days when fever and pain stole his strength, Ethan would sit on that porch, eyes on the road, murmuring, "My boy will be here soon." One elderly neighbor recounted how Ethan refused to be taken to the city hospital in his last week. He stayed in Willow Creek, insisting he didn't want Daniel coming home to an empty house. Grace was with him at the end. She had rushed back from Brooksville when his condition worsened, and she told Daniel through tears that Ethan's last words were his son's name. Each story was a gift and a wound all at once, painting a picture of a father who, despite loneliness and illness, never let go of hope. On the day of the funeral, under a gray somber sky, Daniel stood at his father's graveside with Grace by his side. He felt hollowed out, yet overflowing with emotion, grief, guilt, love, and a resolve forged from pain. As the first shovel of earth was cast, Daniel whispered a promise only he and the wind could hear: "I will remember. I will do better." He realized that making his father proud wasn't about grand achievements or high-paying jobs. It was about being present for those you love, about kindness and loyalty, the very values Ethan had lived by. Grace's hand found Daniel's and squeezed, pulling him out of his reverie. Mother and son held each other, both mourning not just the loss of Ethan, but the years of family life and togetherness that could never be reclaimed. In the weeks after, Daniel remained in Willow Creek to put his father's affairs in order and, more importantly, to feel the life his father had lived. He walked the halls of his old school where Ethan had taught, hearing whispers of, "That's Baba Daniel's son," from former students who remembered the beloved teacher. He spent quiet afternoons under the mango tree in the yard, the very spot where Ethan used to sit in the evenings, and imagined he could sense a gentle presence there with him. The house felt different now, no longer just a place of pain, but a space filled with his father's love in every corner. In Daniel's childhood room, which Ethan had kept almost exactly as it was when he left, Daniel found little notes tucked in books and an old photo of him and his father fishing by the river, both beaming with pride over a tiny fish they caught. These discoveries were like balm on his wounded soul, bittersweet reminders that despite the silence and distance, love had quietly endured. Finally, the day came when Daniel had to return to America. Before leaving, he visited his father's grave one last time. The sun was setting golden orange over Willow Creek's fields. Daniel knelt and placed a hand on the headstone, tracing the carved letters of Ethan's name. "Thank you, Papa, for everything," he whispered, tears slipping down his face. "I hope you know how much I love you." The breeze picked up, rustling the nearby cassava leaves, and for a moment Daniel felt a strange peace, as if in the quiet of that field his father's spirit answered, "I have always known." Daniel stood and wiped his eyes, a somber resolve settling in him. He would carry his father's memory into every tomorrow, a guiding light born of love, regret, and lessons learned. As he walked away, leaving the town of Willow Creek beneath the deepening twilight, Daniel knew that although he had returned too late to say goodbye, he would never again let silence steal what truly mattered.